It's Kyle, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite authors of all time, Ken Follett. I've read numerous books by him. Great books. My favorite books of all time are Ken Follett books. The thing I really enjoy about Ken Follett, I think he does this better than any other author I've read, is really getting an emotional response from you about the characters. Be it whether you love the character or the villains, you actually hate and despise the character, you feel sorry for the character, whatever the emotional response is, Follett is excellent at that. To me, the perfect example of this is in one of my favorite books of all time, The Pillars of the Earth, which the villain in that book is just so bad and so evil that anytime you're reading a passage of the book where he's in, you almost get so mad at the villain for being so evil and doing such bad things to your favorite characters that you get so mad you almost have to put down the book to calm yourself down. But at the same time, he is so interesting that you keep on looking forward to the next time the villain comes in so you can see what he's going to do next, and keep on hoping he'll get his comeuppance. And a lot of times authors aren't able to do that. There's the villains, maybe just they're evil, but you don't find them interesting or something like that. Follett, even when I find some of his books, some of the plots aren't the most fascinating. His characters are always so great and so interesting that a few times when the plot is not quite as good, the characters more than make up for it, and it becomes an interesting story just because of how much you care about the characters. So with that kind of little introduction out of the way, I thought I'd talk about the books of Ken Follett that I have. First up, Jagged Edge. It's a book set in World War II about some female kind of agents who are sent into France before D-Day to try to kind of do some sabotage work for the British. It's an interesting book, very fast-paced, very action-packed. Some of Ken Follett's books cover a long period of time. This is not one of them, if I remember correctly, and it's been a little bit since I've read this book. The action that takes place in this book is over a very short period of time. So, Jagged Edge. Next up, The Night Over Water. Now, I'll be honest, when I was getting all my Ken Follett books down off the bookshelf, this is the one I could not remember what it was about, so I actually had to go to the back cover to see what it was about. And once I read it, it kind of jogged my memory, but I still don't really remember a whole lot about it. But the basic plot, according to the inside cover, is this is another World War II book, except it's set before the war starts. And basically there's a plane, an airliner leaving Europe, heading towards America. There's a lot of people on the plane. They're trying to get away from the soon-to-be war. And you almost get the conflicts of the war played out on this one plane flight across the Atlantic to America. Can't really say too much about the book. Like I said, I really don't remember a whole lot of details. But The Night Over Water, The Man from St. Petersburg. Interesting book. This is one of the early books I read of Ken Follett. I think maybe it's the third or fourth book I ever read of his. Very interesting because it deals with this mysterious figure from Russia who's in England, and there's all this kind of clandestine activities. Winston Churchill's actually a character in it. There's a lot of mystery. It's one of those books, like if you get this more feeling like you're kind of a crime mystery type genre. Really interesting, and it's one of those things. I remember reading this book. It's one of those. I had a hard time putting it down because I couldn't figure out what was going to happen, but I really wanted to know. He did it compelling. Sometimes it can be kind of frustrating with a book like that. This one, it wasn't frustrating. I really enjoyed the ride on finding out what the mystery was. The Third Twin. This was kind of an interesting book I'd actually read fairly recently. Basically, the book's about this genetic researcher who's doing this study on twins, and kind of finding out. The goal of her study is to study one twin who has had a violent life, maybe committed crimes, and the other twin is not violent. And her goal is to try to find twins that are separated at birth, so that way it can just be about the genetics of the twin and not so much about other factors. So she finds a couple of twins like this, But when she starts studying, she realized the twins were born at two different hospitals several hundred miles apart. And she can't figure out how these two guys who are supposed to be twin brothers were born at different hospitals 100 miles apart. And that kind of delves into this mystery that she begins to unravel of this giant kind of genetic conspiracy. It's a really interesting book. I really enjoyed it. It has a lot of kind of interesting science in it. It's a good book. Really enjoyed it. Whiteout kind of reminded me of like a tamed down version of a Stephen King novel. Basically because it involves like a family being isolated and being almost besieged by criminals during a blizzard. And there's lots of Stephen King or other horror novels kind of like that, where some group of individuals are besieged by some force of weather, be it a blizzard or a hurricane or something like that. At the same time, there's some evil force out there that is after them, but they can't get away because of this storm. This doesn't have the supernatural element of a Stephen King thing. It just kind of reminded me of that, of this group of individuals being besieged by a force of nature. At the same time, they're fighting some evil people. Interesting book. Really enjoyed it. Again, the characters were great in it. So, Whiteout. A Place Called Freedom. Great book. Deals a lot with this one individual's search for control over his own life. He starts out as almost an indentured slave in Europe, and begins to work his way up the social ladder, just trying to gain control over his own life, and that leads him to a journey towards America. Character's great. There's a great love interest in this book, some great villains. So A Place Called Freedom, excellent novel. Next up is actually a nonfiction book, On the Wings of Eagles. Interesting book. When I actually picked this book up, because I was actually at a used book sale, I just saw this as a Ken Follett book. I thought, I like Ken Follett books, I'll get it. Didn't really even look to see what it was about, and it wasn't until I got home and started reading it that I realized it was a nonfiction book. And basically what it's about is in the, I see either late 80s, early 80s, late 70s. Let me see if the inside cover says here. Does it say? But it's sometime in the late 70s, early 80s. There's some American contract employees that are in Iran, and as the events of the Iranian Revolution begin to take place, they basically get arrested, and their employer in the United States begins to fear for their employees' lives. So they actually hire some ex-soldiers to basically go into Iran and break these guys out of prison and save their life and get them out of the country. Very fascinating story. The thing I found really interesting about this book, and some of the younger viewers of this channel might not get this, and some of the viewers not from America might not get this interesting aspect, but the company these employees worked for was Ross Perot, who is a very famous third-party political candidate for the United States presidency in the 1990s. He's a very eccentric figure. So it was interesting reading a book that was written about, and he's a major character in this because he's the one that really pushes for his employees to be rescued. It's kind of interesting to read this book that a large part of it's about Ross Perot, but it's before he really became famous to the rest of the United States. He wasn't a presidential candidate yet, so I found that kind of interesting. So it's an interesting nonfiction book, On the Wings of Eagle. If you kind of like fast-paced action novels, this is a nonfiction book you might like because it does have that action novel aspect to it. I think it's because Ken Follett mainly writes fiction, so when he writes a nonfiction one, it almost reads like a fiction novel, which makes sense when you think about it. A Dangerous Fortune. This might be my third favorite Ken Follett novel of all time. It's set in the mid to late 1800s. It kind of revolves this very wealthy British family that basically owns a bank. And there's kind of two branches of the family, and one branch is a little bit more noble, the other branch is a little bit more greedy, and there's a bit of a power struggle over the bank. And there's one side of the family like that is kind of on the evil side, and you're rooting against them, and there's the really good side of the family that you're hoping will win. And very compelling characters. The villain in this book. It's maybe my second favorite Ken Follett villain ever. She is a very evil woman, probably the most evil, manipulating woman I've ever read, actually, in a novel. So A Dangerous Fortune, it's a great book. Next up, I actually have these on a separate side, is my two favorite Ken Follett books of all time, and the reason I'm doing back-to-back is they're basically kind of a series. The Pillars of the Earth and World Without End. Pillars of the Earth is one of my favorite books of all time, usually up there with To Kill a Mockingbird. Love Pillars of the Earth. World Without End is the follow-up book that's set in the same town the Pillars of the Earth is set in, but a few hundred years after. So you have, you know, the descendants of the characters in this book are in this book. So you don't, since it's set several hundred years apart, you don't have the same characters, but you have, you know, if there's the main character in this one, the next book, you know, is like his great-great-great-grandchild. So it's kind of interesting in that aspect. Pillars of the Earth, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, has the best villain, in my opinion, in a book I've ever read. He's absolutely awesome, has some great, good characters as well. Awesome storyline, it's very compelling. This book takes place basically over the course of entire lifetimes of the characters in the novel. So because of that, it's very detailed. You really get to know the characters. You get to see them develop as they get older, as they have events shape them. Basically, this is set in a period of virtual anarchy in England, as there's multiple claimants to the throne. So there's an ongoing civil war. Because of this, there's really no central authority. So villains, like the character in this book, can almost do anything he wants to, not fear repercussions. Good characters don't have any protection because of this. So it makes a very unpredictable storyline that's very, very entertaining. Really enjoyed it. Pillars of the Earth, like I said, is one of my favorite novels of all time. World Without End was a great book. Wasn't quite as good as Pillars of the Earth, but it's very, very good. I really enjoyed it. It's a good follow-up novel. I would recommend, though, if you're going to read this book, read Pillars of the Earth first. I'm not sure how much you would enjoy this book if you hadn't read Pillars of the Earth, where I think if you read Pillars of the Earth and then you read this one, you'll get a whole lot more enjoyment out of it. So that is my discussions on Ken Follett books. I actually have another one that I've got fairly recently. It's his newer book that's set in Russia, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so I'm not going to include it in this video because I can't really speak too much of it since I haven't read it yet. I'm sure it'll be great. I've actually reviewed a few Ken Follett books in the past on the book review channel, Reread Books, so I'll post the links to those reviews in the description box below. So just check those out if you'd like to see more detailed reviews of some Ken Follett books I've done in the past. And I hope you'll take the time to check out a Ken Follett book if you've never read one of his works. If you have read Ken Follett and there's a book of his you read and really enjoyed and I didn't mention it in this video, please let me know. I know he's written a lot more books than I've read. I haven't had a chance to get them all. So if there's one of his books you really enjoyed that I did not mention, please let me know so I can, you know, hopefully check it out in 2012. So I hope you enjoyed the video and I look forward to seeing you the next time.